December 16, 1944, 5:18 a.m. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The world was still black when the first German shells screamed over the treetops. A frozen mist clung to the pines, the air sharp enough to bite exposed skin. American outposts, thinly spread, half asleep, shivering in foxholes, jerked awake as the horizon exploded into a wall of fire. Snow blasted upward like white shrapnel. Radios crackled. Men scrambled for rifles they had set aside only hours earlier. Then came the sound that chilled every soldier to his bones. Engines. Hundreds of them. Tank engines. The ground trembled as German panzers, panthers, tigers, jagdpanthers, roared out of the fog like steel phantoms. Behind them, thousands of infantry surged forward in disciplined waves. The attack was so sudden, so violent, so impossibly coordinated that American officers at first refused to believe it. Reports streamed in from 50 miles of front. Enemy armor breakout, unknown strength. Artillery positions overrun. We're cut off. They're everywhere. In the chaos, one captured American lieutenant stared at the German columns charging past and muttered through numb lips, "My God, this was planned. Every inch of it." He was right. This was Operation Walk dem Rhein, Hitler's final, meticulously crafted offensive. His perfect plan. A surprise attack designed to split the Allied armies, seize Antwerp, and force peace on Germany's terms. Every detail had been rehearsed. Fake radio silence, disguised tanks, infiltrators in U.S. uniforms, tight armored spearheads meant to smash through before the Allies could react. And for the first 12 hours, it worked. American lines buckled. Villages fell. Roadblocks vanished under tank treads. Paratroopers were cut off. Artillery batteries abandoned. Ammunition dumps captured. The snow turned gray with smoke, black with oil, red with blood. Hitler watched updates in his Wolf's Lair bunker with trembling excitement. Maps showed breakthroughs. Columns advanced faster than expected. His generals, terrified of disappointing him, nodded eagerly. "Mein Führer," they reported, "your plan is unfolding flawlessly." But out in the Ardennes, where the snowstorm thickened and the sky darkened, cracks were already forming. Cracks Hitler refused to see. At 8:42 a.m., a Tiger II ran out of fuel barely 6 miles past the front line. At 9:15 a.m., an entire Panther battalion stalled when a single muddy road collapsed under their weight. At 10:06 a.m., 3 disguised German saboteurs were captured by a U.S. MP who simply didn't like the way they pronounced an American city name. Small failures, tiny missteps, but each one chipped away at the perfect plan. And then, around noon, something Hitler never accounted for happened. A single group of American soldiers refused to retreat. The 57 men of an outpost near the crossroads town of Lanzerath held their position against nearly 500 advancing German paratroopers. They fought until weapons overheated, until ammunition ran dry, until darkness swallowed the forest. By the time they were finally overrun, they had done the impossible. They delayed an entire German division. Hitler didn't know it. Not yet. But the failure of his masterpiece had just begun. Because within the next 48 hours, the plan he believed flawless would unravel piece by piece. Not from Allied superiority, but from the flaws he refused to see, the realities he refused to admit, and the arrogance that would cost German forces everything. Snow whipped sideways across the Ardennes as the second morning of the offensive dawned, gray, bitter, and unforgiving. German armored columns pushed deeper into Belgium, but something was wrong. Very wrong. The lightning advance Hitler had promised now crawled forward like a wounded animal, coughing diesel fumes into the freezing air. General Otto von Manschufel stood on the roadside beside a stalled Panther, breath steaming in the cold. He listened to the distant thud of artillery, watched mechanics struggle with frozen fuel lines, and felt a dread he dared not voice near Hitler's loyalists. "This ground, it is no place for armor," he muttered. It should have been obvious. The Ardennes wasn't open plains or paved highways. It was narrow forest paths, mud-choked farm roads, and a maze of tight bends. German tanks, built with precision but over-engineered for simplicity, struggled in the terrain. Panthers slipped sideways on icy slopes. Tigers blew transmissions trying to climb frozen hills. Half-tracks crawled inches at a time through rutted snow. And the deeper they pushed, the more Hitler's perfect plan fell apart. At a crossroads near Boulingen, a young SS tank commander slammed his fist against the turret wall. His column had been stuck for an hour behind a broken-down Königstiger, King Tiger. Not destroyed, not shot, just immobilized, its gearbox shattered from the cold. The rest of the column couldn't move around it. The road was too narrow, the snow too deep. Hitler had assumed speed. Reality delivered gridlock. And fuel, his grandest illusion, began to vanish. By mid-morning, a radio operator in Kampfgruppe paper sent an urgent transmission. Fuel stores empty. Request immediate resupply. But there was no resupply. The first fuel convoy had been captured. Another had vanished in the snow. A third was trapped behind stalled Panthers. Hitler had ordered his spearheads to capture American fuel along the way. He never understood war well enough to ask, what if the Americans burned it? At 11:17 a.m., near Stavelot, the Americans did exactly that. Engineers set thousands of gallons of precious fuel ablaze, turning the sky black with oily smoke. The flames reflected off the snow in a hellish glow, and nearby German tankers stared in disbelief as their hopes literally went up in fire. Meanwhile, the disguised German commandos, Skorzenny's men dressed in American uniforms, began sowing confusion. Road signs were flipped, bridges falsely reported destroyed, false rumors spread of enemy breakthroughs. It was clever sabotage, but it also backfired. American commanders became suspicious of everyone. Military police set up checkpoints where soldiers were grilled with questions only real Americans would know. Who won the World Series? What's Mickey Mouse's dog's name? Spell Massachusetts. Correct answers meant passage. Wrong answers meant arrest. And German infiltrators failed these tests spectacularly. Before noon, several were captured. By evening, interrogations revealed Hitler's ruse, and suddenly every German wearing an enemy uniform risked immediate execution. The deception that was supposed to confuse the Allies now only hardened their resolve. But the biggest turning point of the second day wasn't sabotage, fuel, or armor. It was human defiance. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne arrived, cold, exhausted, half-supplied, and immediately formed a defensive ring around the town. They had no tanks, few heavy weapons, and little ammunition. But they had something Hitler didn't account for. A belief that holding Bastogne meant stopping Germany's last chance. As German troops advanced, old stone buildings erupted in fire. Paratroopers fought room to room, attic to street, foxhole to cellar. The Germans expected the Americans to break. They didn't. They dug in. They held the crossroads. They stalled an entire panzer army. And every hour they held, Hitler's perfect timetable collapsed. At midnight, snow began falling thicker, a heavy, smothering curtain that blinded aircraft and slowed every tank tread to a groaning crawl. Vehicles froze where they sat. Tires shattered. Engines seized. Men huddled behind burning hay bales to keep frostbite from claiming their fingers. German officers stared at their maps in disbelief. In just 48 hours, the perfect plan, the one Hitler was certain would split the Allies, was choking on cold, mud, fuel shortages, unexpected American resistance, and terrain Hitler never bothered to study. And the worst news had not yet reached him. Because high above the storm, Allied reconnaissance planes were finally breaking through the clouds, and they were about to see everything. Dawn on December 18th broke with a sound the Germans had prayed not to hear. The distant drone of engines, thousands of them. The skies, after 2 days of heavy snow and blinding fog, finally cleared. The weather Hitler depended on, the storm he believed would shield his advancing armies, was gone. A vast blue canvas opened above the Ardennes as Allied reconnaissance aircraft soared overhead. Lieutenant Mark Fuller of the 9th Air Force pressed his face to the frosted canopy and whispered, "Holy, look at all of them." Below him, the forest no longer hid the truth. Columns of panthers and tigers jammed in narrow roads. Trucks stranded in ditches. Fuel depots burning. Infantry bottlenecked in mountain passes. Abandoned motorcycles half buried in snow. Wrecked half-tracks. Bridges blown too early or too late. A monster of an offensive, frozen, snarled, vulnerable. Within minutes, Allied radios crackled across Europe. Eyes on enemy main force. Full grid location transmitted. Hitler's perfect plan was now perfectly exposed. By mid-morning, the first Allied fighter bombers arrived. P-47 Thunderbolts, P-38 Lightnings. Hawker Typhoons from the Royal Air Force. They dove like hawks on prey. Roads turned into firestorms as rockets streaked downward in white arcs. Panthers erupted in orange pillars. Fuel trucks exploded into mushroom clouds of black smoke. Soldiers diving for cover watched their only supply routes vanish under aerial bombardment. A German major radioed frantically. "We're being slaughtered. The sky is full of them." In just 1 hour, 22 German vehicles burned on a single stretch of road near Malmedy. In another, a Tiger II tried to turn around, slipped on ice, and crashed sideways, blocking the entire column behind it. Pilots later called it the greatest target field of the war. Hitler's dream of speed became an immobile scrapyard. But even as bombs fell, the German high command struggled with a more devastating truth. Their entire offensive timetable was dead. American reinforcements, racing along parallel roads unaffected by snowdrifts and traffic jams, soon poured into threatened towns. Fresh artillery battalions set up firing lines. Engineers blasted craters to further block German armor. And in Bastogne, surrounded, cold, starving, the 101st Airborne still refused to break. By midday, German negotiators approached the American lines with a white flag. They offered surrender terms. General McAuliffe, half-frozen and exhausted, scribbled his famous reply. "Nuts." The message was carried back through the German lines. Some officers thought it was code. Others thought it was madness. But it was neither. It was defiance. And defiance is what finally broke Hitler's plan. As the sun set on that second day of clear skies, German commanders understood the truth they dared not say aloud. They had no fuel to advance, no roads to move on, no surprise left, no timetable remaining, no hope of punching through to Antwerp. Hitler watched reports pile up on his desk, every one darker than the last. His staff hesitated, shifting nervously, waiting for the explosion of rage they feared. None came. Instead, Hitler stared blankly at the map. The red arrows he drew now little more than fantasies trapped on paper. "How?" he whispered. "How could my perfect plan fail?" The answer was everywhere around him. He ignored the terrain. He underestimated American grit. He overestimated German fuel. He trusted weather more than strategy. He believed arrogance could replace logistics. The Ardennes, his last gamble, his last chance to reshape the war, was finished. Not in weeks, not in months, but in just 48 hours. The offensive would drag on, yes. Fighting would continue. Men would still die, but the outcome was already sealed by the second dawn. From that moment on, the Nazis no longer dictated the war's direction. They reacted. They stalled. They retreated. The war that Hitler dreamed would end in his triumph, instead began ending in his collapse. All because the perfect plan he trusted more than his generals, his soldiers, or even reality, fell apart faster than the snow he counted on to hide it.